Can I like to bring the meeting to order, please?
Yeah, that's wrong. That's different.
I'd like to bring the meeting to order. So the Board of Selectmen is, we have a quorum, so we will open our meeting. This is a joint, it's a meeting of the Board of Selectmen, which is why I'm doing the talking. But it's a joint meeting with the Finance Committee for the purposes of, I guess, final preparation for the budget, which will really be debated at town meeting in the end. So the agenda tonight will be, we're going to have our town administrator just go through the town budget first, including the capital issues and all of those questions from the Finance Committee, obviously, or whatever they think is important to it. After that, we will go to the school board budget. The school administration is here, and we'll have a discussion about that. I will take questions from the audience or statements from the audience. I just ask you to keep it informational, or if there are questions that need to be addressed that you think we haven't addressed, because the real purpose of this is so that particularly the Finance Committee can have as much information as possible before they make their final decisions, which would be probably Monday. So, okay, I guess we've opened this meeting. We need to open their meeting.
Yeah, I move to open the Halifax Finance Committee meeting at 6:32 p.m.
All right, so I'll turn it over to the town administrator for a budget overview.
You just want to mention that it's being recorded.
Oh, right, we're being recorded. Sorry. For some reason, I keep forgetting that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Bruno. So I want to go through and provide a brief presentation on just the budget process this year for the town of Halifax, the timeline and how we've gotten here today for the board and also for the public so they know where we are. So we started our budget process a little bit earlier this year. One of the some of the feedback that I heard from the Finance Committee and the community as a whole was it felt like we were rushed as we got through the budget process, that we would get to March, April, and it was just rushing. So we issued our budget memo to departments October 26th. The operational guidelines were approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. Those were due by all departments on December 15th. And then January 2024, we began our budget review meetings. We had department heads in to present their budgets with myself, our town accountant, and the Finance Committee liaisons. In February, the Finance Committee held meetings to have the large departments in and review those budgets. And then here we are in March, April. The Finance Committee is voting their recommendations to present a balanced budget to town meeting. Our fiscal year 2025 operating budget guidelines really had four main principles. We asked departments to provide level service budgets, to only provide increases for wages and to maintain their existing service levels. We also asked them to present a second budget which demonstrated a 10% budget reduction, and if they were to allocate that 10% reduction, where they would do that and what the impact would be on the community. We asked them to provide us with data and metrics to demonstrate what impact their budget has on services. And then we also asked for fiscal year 2024 accomplishments and fiscal year 2025 goals. To give you an idea of the budget that we're working with, these are our revenue estimates for fiscal year 2025. We're able to raise another $561,891 in our levy limit over fiscal 24. We're able to increase our local receipt estimates by $224,524, and our state aid increase this year is a net of $19,734 based on the governor's budget. So total increased revenue from fiscal 24 of $806,149. And then you see I also put a little graph there. I thought this was telling, of the growth in town. So a major contributor of our revenue is new growth. We can only increase our property taxes 2.5% over the prior year's levy, and then you add in new growth. So you can see in fiscal 21 we had almost $250,000 in new growth. Fiscal 22 we were around 175. Fiscal 23 we were around 150. Last year we were in the 140s range, and we're only estimating $82,000 of new growth this year. So I met with our assessor last week, and the number that she told me to utilize was $82,000. So that's a significant impact on the community, and we're seeing this decline, which results in a revenue decline. Our fiscal year 2025 budgets, we received a total request of $30,510,833. That represented a little over $2.1 million increase over fiscal 24, which was a 7.53% increase. And of that was a little over $2 million was in general fund increases. The rest was from our enterprise funds, particularly our water department and our solid waste. In the budget that our administration has recommended, the total is $29,406,240. This represents a $1.05 million increase over fiscal 24, 3.64%. Of that, you can see the $1,016,867 is general fund increases. And I also want to note that based on the budget constraints that we've been in, myself and our town accountant, Sandy Nolan, have gone in and recommended reductions in our general government budgets of over $165,000 already. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention was, there's been a lot of information or misinformation that, these budget issues are being driven by wage increases. So the wage increases for all general fund departments, so take out our enterprise funds and take out the schools, is $163,788. So, looking at a $30 million budget, that's not a huge portion. I also wanted to just put together this visual. So you can see on the left is our makeup of the fiscal 24 adjusted budget and the percentage of each of the categories. So you have education at 52%, public works, which is our water, our highway, solid waste at 9%, human services, health and human services at 2%, culture and recreation at 2%, our debt services at 2%, our fixed costs is at 13%, general government 6%, public safety 14%. In the administrative recommended budget, you can see those percentages are pretty much all the same, with the education at 52 and so on and so forth. And then the last thing I just wanted to note was some of the notable changes in the budget this year and the drivers of some of our increases. Our fixed costs, our pension assessment, which we have no control over, is a 9% increase, $154,200. That is what our pension assessment is. Our health insurance is a 10.5% increase, $115,805 we're anticipating. General government increases, $14,240 in our assessor's expense. We previously funded some operating cost of the assessor's budget out of free cash. That's not a good practice because it's an annual cost, so that's now in their budget. We've consolidated our office machines line item, so postage is all basically under one account, so you'll see that $23,500 reallocation there. An increase of a little over $21,000 in IT expense, primarily driven by increased software licenses. Also, we're implementing several efficiencies, such as online licensing and permitting. There is a cost that comes with that. And then the education, as voted by the current school committees, represents a $676,344 increase, or 4.54%. So I just wanted to provide kind of that as a background of this is the process that we've followed, and this is how we've gotten to where we are in the budget process.
I'll turn it over to Todd, and folks have whatever thoughts, questions. You're not fine.
No, that's.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that was a great summary. I mean, I don't really have much more to add, just, stating the obvious, as folks, seeing in the pie chart there, that 65% of the budget is consumed by the school and our fixed costs, so we're really operating within that 35% margin to run the town services and such. So it is a challenge. We certainly have our hands full this year, which we'll get into the school budget in a moment. But yeah, no, I think we've definitely made some improvements in the overall process and the timeline. I think that collectively needs to be further improvement, so we're not, having these meetings at the 12th hour, because we do need to print the warrant next week. So we're really up against the 12th hour here to make our final decisions and get everything printed for the town meeting. So I don't know if there's anything else folks wanted to add on the committee, but.
One of the things I will note, so we have projected out our costs. We've been pretty proactive with the town side of operations. We've been trying to work with the schools. Myself and our town accountant have met regularly, monthly, with the school admin team. That's been beneficial in really attacking this head on. So what we did is we anticipated what we could absorb from the school department and our cost of education. We provided that number early on in how that was allocated. We knew there would be some reallocation with the new regional agreement and some of the items that were being done differently. So our main concern really was, this is what our total, what we can afford total cost between the Silver Lake assessment and the elementary school cost. So we asked them to do their best to reach that number. In what the Silver Lake assessment was voted, there was a deficit of a little over $700,000. We relayed that information to the elementary school and the administration. The administration did an excellent job of putting together proposed cuts of that $700,000 to meet what the town could afford. The school committee met on Monday and they approved $500,000 in cuts. So that does leave us at a $200,000 deficit, where we need to decide how we're going to make up that deficit. And so I think probably a good point to turn it over to the schools to provide kind of an explanation of the budget and what's changed and how we got here.
Let me see if anybody on the board has any questions first.
That was a pretty good synopsis.
On the school committee there? Sure.
Sorry about this.
Thank you.
I'm not necessarily a hold the microphone type of person. Sorry. My name's Sarah Hickey. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations for the Silver Lake Regional School District. I began in this position at the end of November. The Halifax budget was the first budget that I created. As soon as I was done that, I started the Silver Lake budget. As soon as I was done that, I did the Kingston budget, then the Plimpton budget, and then it was February. And I put together the assessments and sat down and looked at the big picture, and the amount of increase in the total cost of education was substantial. And so with February and all of March, we spent looking through every single line in all four of the entities' budgets, looking for what might have been a mistake. I spent months, honestly, looking for a $4 million mistake somewhere. I would have been professionally embarrassed, but relieved had I found it. It was never found. We had substantial increases in a lot of areas. So one of the things that I did this year, because the Silver Lake and Halifax budgets changed dramatically, was I put together what I refer to as the total cost of education. I felt that that was necessary because there were certain requirements for Silver Lake and Halifax that were given to us by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education before I started working here. But essentially, Silver Lake is not an elementary school district, so the pre-K program, which had been running out of Silver Lake, had to formally become a Silver Lake program. The out-of-district tuitions that were being paid by Halifax in FY24, the out-of-district tuitions for pre-K through grades 12 plus, were all Halifax costs, and that's not appropriate. That students should be paid for by the school that their peers attend. So a student in 7th grade that has an out-of-district placement should be paid by Silver Lake, not by Halifax. And so there was a considerable amount of shifting of where expenses went, which is why the total cost of education I felt was important. The other thing that we were mandated from, I don't know if that's the right word, but from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, was to stop the practice of using out-of-district tuitions to fund students from Halifax attending substantially separate classrooms in Kingston, or in substantially separate classrooms in the middle school or the high school. So this was a case of employees that were hired by Silver Lake that were potentially working in Kingston, and they were being paid out of a revolving account that was being billed to the out-of-district tuition line in Halifax. So with the at the request, we were told by DESE it needed to be done. All of this has been untangled, and I think that part of the confusion with the FY25 budget is that these increases are being attributed to the structural changes, and that is not necessarily the case. We are seeing substantial increases in contractual services, in the cost of transportation, privatized transportation for special ed students, tuitions, the health insurance, the cost of supplies. And so what we presented was a level service budget, and it was a substantial increase. I don't know if you have questions. Do you want me to be very specific with things? How would you like me to proceed?
So we have essentially a $200,000 deficit. That's what we're dealing with ultimately, right? We have to figure out how to answer it. Okay, so the answer could be that the school budget is reduced by $200,000, or the town budget's reduced by $200,000, or some combination of the two, right? And the Finance Committee hasn't had enough time yet to digest that, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, we just learned this probably like 15 minutes ago, so, in fact, not all the committee has heard that either, so we're just hearing it now for the first time, so I just heard it 15 minutes ago myself, but, the major problem here, I think, and, I'd like to open it up to folks if they have any questions or comments, I guess, but, we've already proactively addressed the budget, right? Like, the whole goal, as Cody laid out, as part of the, the budget process for this year, we proactively requested two budgets, right? So a level service funded budget and then a 10% reduction. So I think we've really slimmed down the budget to its bare bones. To go any further would, I think, have a material impact on the town. And so I think the town citizens will, we'll need to make that decision, I guess, if we want to, go that route. From a finance committee, it's not something we recommend to do, so, we'll need to take a vote, I guess, at the end of the day here to decide how we want to move forward, but, there was some ideas kicked around about, further, like, pulling some additional money out in some areas, like cutting back, some sick incentives and things like that, and, scaling back OPEB, but I think doing those additional haircuts are going to really jeopardize our overall financial situation, which I think I definitely would not advise to proceed down that road. So I think at the end of the day, I think we're stuck at the 20,000, 20,000 boy. But I'd like to, if anybody has any questions or comments for the school committee or.
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if I understand it correctly, based on the meeting from Monday, I think it was Monday, there was an additional $120,000 in cuts that was really undetermined as to where that was coming from. How confident are we that $200,000 number is in fact the $200,000 number, knowing that there's still $120,000 that is unaccounted for in terms of cuts on the school side?
So they have line item autonomy with the school budget, so we vote a figure, and then how they work that figure is up to the administration.
Okay.
So as long as the bottom line figure is what the town can afford, how they distribute those cuts is really up to them as a committee, administration.
Is your question what the specific areas were?
No. I just wanted to make sure that we were confident as a group here that the $200,000 was in fact the $200,000. I don't want to vote on something today and have it come back to be higher.
Can I ask something? Yeah. So just for you guys, Jill, and maybe you guys can help me out. So a substantial jump this year, and we mentioned that it's the untangling with DESI. Do we foresee this being a one-time substantial jump as part, I guess my question is, part of this large jump because we had to untangle things with them, or do you see this being as a standard procedure going forward, I guess, as far as budgeting goes?
There are some increases because of the untangling, some efficiencies that cannot be realized when you go from being structured as if you were a regional district to operating independently. Sometimes, for example, when you create a program in another school, you need more staff, or you need additional staff, as opposed to having one program within a district. So there's some of that. Again, the restructuring changed the buckets of money and where they were located, but the increases were because in addition to that, you also had the increases due to inflation. So we had line items that were increasing
Much larger.
regardless. It had nothing to do with the structure. Health insurance has nothing to do with the structure. Well, I can't say health insurance had nothing to do with the structure because you had more people moving into the Silver Lake budget with that particular piece. But part of this issue is inflation and the costs that all schools are experiencing. And some of it has to do with increased cost in special education transportation. So regardless of whether or not we had to create this new structure,
Sure.
we were going to realize some of those increases. It has to do with the cost of out-of-district special education tuition, which again is, some of these out-of-district programs are able to increase their tuitions by 14, 18% over the last 2 years. And what's happening is that's not happening in our schools. We're not receiving that same kind of increase in terms of support for our state funding or federal funding.
And in talking with different folks, this is not just a Halifax problem I'm hearing. Is there any move maybe with superintendents across the Commonwealth to make our case to the state that our costs are far outpacing what we're getting from them, that we can try to fix this situation?
So one of the things that they have done is the Mass Association of School Superintendents, as well as MASC, and I believe MTA as well, has participated, is working to help educate the state about the impact of certain things being underfunded or unfunded mandates, which we have been talking about for many years. There was a letter that I believe I sent out to the town administrator that kind of talks about the fiscal cliff, that I think is helpful. Again, each school district has their own unique increases and issues that they're facing depending upon the needs of their students or the composition, but it is a statewide issue.
Yeah, okay.
I hope that helps to clarify.
No, it does. I just hope that it reaches the ears that it needs to reach and that we're not going through this whole thing again next year. She's not allowed to use the green one.
I'm not, I
use the green
can't.
one.
Does this work? Okay. The other concern we have for next year is, as Sarah mentioned, that now that like a 7th grader that's in an out-of-district program that used to belong to Halifax meant that we would get the circuit breaker money in Halifax, but now that's going to be going to Silver Lake's budget, and we're not going to see similar circuit breaker money next year, which is a huge concern for our budget next year, just to have full transparency.
That's for special ed.
Yeah, that's for special ed, which, yes?
Can we just talk about the special ed a little bit, I guess, further? I guess one of the things I see on the line item budget is a drastic increase in special education teaching, as well as the aides is like $425,000 increase. So just trying to understand, is that, so has the number of special education students drastically risen that's then warranted additional staff, or like what's the background of this kind of?
So that increase in those lines, you'll see increases in the instructional lines and in the aides, so the teaching lines and the aides lines. Those are due to the IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Educational Act. There is a grant that the town receives called the 240 grant, and the current special ed director has elected, and I support her 100% in this, to move that money to pay for tuitions instead of staff. It actually cuts down significantly on the paperwork of the grant to take a $200,000 grant amount and pay it out in 3 payments to a school instead of paying it out in 26 paychecks to 14 people.
Okay, so just to be clear, there's no increase in special education teaching or aides as far
No,
as additional adds to staff?
One of the things I explained to the teachers' unions yesterday was if they walk around the building, the staff that are in the building now are going to be the staff that are in the building. What's happening is the aides that are currently being paid out of that grant fund will be Halifax employees next year. The tuitions in the amount of what those employees would be paid next year are allocated to be paid out of the grant.
Okay, all right, that's helpful, thank you for that. And then my second question is just in relation to the transportation, which has come up in past years and, you know, kind of gotten out of control, I think back in fiscal year '23, I think it was. And then so Jim and I actually, in the committee, had spent a significant amount of time kind of going through the fine details in there. We kind of hit a roadblock on, you know, some of the assessment, but what we found interestingly was that about 80% of that cost was actually local, so it was to Kingston, within Kingston, and not to like Randolph and other surrounding towns. So my question is have we done any work to see how we can potentially reduce those transportation costs, whether it's being creative in how we manage that or looking at other service providers, which I totally understand is probably limited, you know, suppliers that offer that service, but you know, if you could speak to that, I guess.
There is sort of a perfect storm for transportation that started with the pandemic. And during the pandemic, the bus companies were told you could only put 11 students on a 72-passenger bus. And on a 7D vehicle that would normally carry 8 students and a monitor and a driver, you could only put 2 students. And we're required by law to transport students that require specialized transportation. So those minibuses or minivans that were transporting students, you could no longer put 6 students, you could no longer put 3 students in them. And all of a sudden, these transportation companies started springing up to help ease the burden because we are required by law to provide transportation. But the helping ease the burden, I came here from Middleborough, we had students that were, we were getting quotes for $150 a day in 2017, 2018, 2019. In 2020, now it's $450 a day for the same trip. So, and then the other perfect storm is there was a wonderful woman that lived here in Halifax that ran a transportation company that did the bulk of the transportation for the Silver Lake Regional School District, the minivan transportation, and she retired. I spent time on the phone with her trying to talk her out of retiring because she was not, I'm going to use the word price gouging, but she wasn't taking advantage of the situation, but she closed up shop towards the spring of 2021, and so the cost of transportation has skyrocketed, which you've made reference to. So one of the things that the special education director is working on is examining the routes and consolidating routes whenever possible. One of the things that I'm working on is specifically the transportation to the Silver Lake preschool. There are students that are riding in minivans that could go on a 21-passenger bus. And so I have a meeting with First Student tomorrow to talk about what are the possibilities for us for providing that. Not every student that attends the preschool has an education plan that requires specialized transportation. We're not going to send a 71-passenger bus to pick up the kids of Halifax and bring them to the integrated preschool in Kingston, but a 20-passenger bus could pick up 8 kids instead of sending 8 minivans. So it's something that we're in talks about. So transportation is very difficult, and we keep joking, myself and my school business manager friends, when we retire, we're going to buy a bunch of minivans and make millions of dollars. But it's sad that that's a joke.
Sure, yeah.
Can I ask, Sarah, does that go out to bid? Does that process go out to bid, or how does that work?
So special ed and related services are exempt from 30B.
Okay.
And so with, for example, with homeless transportation, we're required to get 3 quotes and go with, if you can find 3 quotes.
That's my other question is-
Solicit, I believe the language in the law is solicit 3 quotes.
Okay.
Whether you actually get 3 is a surprise sometimes.
That's what I was
But-
wondering, if we're not getting bids from enough companies to make things competitive at all.
Well, it's not competitive.
Yeah.
So, but also, again, related services for special ed are exempt from 30B.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So just to follow up on that point, when is the last time, is this something that we do annually in regards to transportation? Do we try to get new quotes each year, or do we just kind of renew with what we have on board already?
Are we talking about regular ed transportation or special ed
Special ed.
transportation? Special ed transportation, I'm not 100% sure. I started in November.
Okay.
So every year, a child's plan is reviewed, and as part of that, so will the transportation accommodations, and to the best of their ability, they try to secure transportation, and they look for multiple opportunities or quotes. There have been certain points where there have only been certain vendors that have been available to pick up students and bring them to certain programs, whether it be in district or out of district, and some of those costs are pretty high.
And what about standard transportation?
We are currently in year 4 of a 5-year bid that did a contract with First Student that went out to bid, and there are 2 option years at the end of the contract. What I will tell you is the increases that are built into this contract are very favorable. It's not, I was surprised and happy when I learned I wasn't going out to bid for big bus transportation anytime soon.
Thanks, Sarah.
Mrs. Hatch had something?
You're good.
Green light.
I just want to kind of make one footnote regarding special education, and a lot of our fiscal cliff issues have sort of developed from special education. Our Director of Special Education, Dr. Panarisi, is going to review the entire program to make sure that we are not over-servicing any students. We will never under-service a student, but there may be circumstances that we are over-servicing, and that's not fair to the community. So she is going to scrub through the program and see if there are places that we can gain savings and not under-service any student by any means. So I just want to let you know we're very sensitized to this, and she is going to do a thorough review of the program.
Can I ask you, so obviously the big question here is this $200,000. Do you have, anyone from the school department have anything you can let us or the finance committee know as to what that $200,000, assuming it wasn't, we had to cut the school budget by that amount, what that's going to amount to? I know you don't, you can do whatever you want once you get the number, but if you would give maybe everyone here some idea as to what we're talking about in terms of another $200,000 reduction in the school budget.
Sure.
And it doesn't, I don't mean to make this too precise, but I do think it's important that the budget people, particularly the finance committee, understands what your thinking is in terms of a smaller budget than what you have already come up with.
So in terms of proposed reductions, the administrative team proposed a number of tiers for the school committee to consider, and they ended up reducing it by $500,000. So in the presentation, it's called Proposed Reductions at HES, the second to the last slide.
Here somewhere. You got it?
Give Cody a second here, he can, for everyone to see. I just think it's important that we discuss the hard facts, that's what we want to do.
Yeah, they didn't do, you know, they didn't get into the silver.
Yeah, and then part too.
To be honest, I can't see the screen at all from here. I apologize. Do I have the, I have the paper? So, on the bottom of the second to last page were the proposed reductions at Halifax Elementary School. The school committee had tasked us in our February meeting to make 3 tiers of cuts. One would be 300,000, one would be 500, put us up to 500,000, and then the last would put us up to the full 700, I believe 4,000 is what was required for us to meet the requirements by the town, the threshold set by the town. And so the school administration, excuse me, the school administration and central administration worked diligently and came up with these proposed cuts. So the Tier 1 proposed cuts totaled $313,000, was a one-time offset from the building utilization fund. That is a revolving account that facility rentals go into. Principal Beaudry recommended reducing the supply line, both teaching and custodial, by $101,000. Proposed reducing the bus runs from 10 buses a day to 8 buses a day, which would save $74,000. Reducing 2 support staff, which would save $58,000, and reducing 1, the FTE on there stands for full-time equivalent. So 1 full-time equivalent custodian to half-time, and that would save $27,000. That was the total of the Tier 1 proposed cuts. Tier 2 proposed cuts was to reduce the assistant principal from 260 days of work a year to 204 days. That would save $9,000. To reduce 2.4 FTE from the Halifax Teachers Association, the principal recommended reducing a position of a behaviorist at 1.0, an instrumental teacher at 0.4, and a reading specialist at 1.0. There was an additional suggestion for reducing 2 support staff for an additional $58,000, and in the main office, reduce one of the full-time aides to 0.8, which would save $6,000. That Tier 2 cuts totaled $241,000, and Tier 1 and Tier 2 together was $554,000. The Tier 3 cuts would cut 1.9 full-time equivalent, so that would be 1 classroom teacher, 5 specialist teachers, moving them from full-time to 9/10 time, and moving an interventionist from 1.0 to 0.6, and then transitioning the remainder of the 0.4 of that salary into the Title I grant. So that's actually only a cut of 1.9 FTE and not the interventionist. That's transitioning money to a different source, and that was savings of $150,000, which would bring the total cuts up to $704,000. This is what was proposed by the principal.
So you've got, as far as Tier 1 and Tier 2, in the current budget reduction, or no?
We voted to eliminate all of Tier 1, we voted to do the Tier 1 proposed cuts. And then in Tier 2, we voted specifically to reduce the assistant principal to 204 days and the main office reduction to 0.8, and which got us from the 313. And then we also did the math interventionist in Tier 3 to move the payment to, which brought us up to about $380,000 in cuts. And then I said we have to do more. So then at that point, because we really couldn't decide what to cut, because it was a hard decision, and had been there for 3 hours at that point. And we proposed just to have, to vote a budget that was $500,000 less to try our best to meet the requests. And there were some fundamental differences in theories on how to achieve the cuts as well. So there was a lot of discussion about that.
Anybody from the Finance Committee have any comments, questions about any of that?
I guess, just to add, so everybody's aware too, like, these numbers don't reflect the impact to the town as far as unemployment costs and such when you make these cuts, so just to make folks aware of that
That's
as
correct.
well. So it's not that we will take the savings to the town, there'll be a net number. But anybody have any questions from the committee? Comments from the board? No?
It may be beneficial, I know I was at the meeting on Monday, but how you came to that 500,000 would be helpful, I think, for the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen to understand, because, we had proposed the 704 in order to be able to absorb it into our budget, and you guys did vote the 5. So it would just be helpful on how you determined 5.
Well, obviously it's a voting board, and so, as a board, we had differing opinions on how to achieve the cuts. And so there was just a lot of debate, and so some people wanted to leave us at about, at the tier 1 plus the few extras from tier 2 and tier 3, and I said, the town asked us to do remove $680,000 from our budget, and I don't feel like we need to do a little bit, we need to cut more. And so, like I said, we had been there for quite a long time, and that was pretty much, as the chair, I pretty much knew that was about where the board was going to vote to cut, and that we weren't going to be able to get additional cuts that night. So.
Okay, so I know Mr. Weezy has something he wants to say, and then we'll open it up to questions.
I just have a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were all set with it.
So I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyways. What were the concerns with the cuts that you did not make from the budget? What caused you not to make those cuts? Was it primarily a student to teacher ratio? How did you reach that?
Well, we were concerned about removing so much support staff from the school. And I can only speak for myself as far as what I was thinking, really. The vote is the vote, but for me, I was concerned that the cuts we were making were going to remove support, and then that we were going to have to make additional cuts next year. And the fundamental debate essentially was, should we reduce some of the grades to have what would still be considered what the principal told me was acceptable class sizes of 23 students or less, and which I felt like more matched our declining enrollment over time. So that was really what the debate was about, how to accomplish it. And so, it's a hard decision. It's a horrible decision to make. It's people's lives, their jobs. It's it's hard to go through all this again, honestly. But so there was that discussion. So from my viewpoint, I was extremely anxious about cutting additional support staff when I'm afraid of what's going to have to happen next year. And if we do end up having to reduce any grades with classroom teachers, will they have the support they need? And so that's where I'm coming from personally, but also just, it was so hard to get to that point, and you just kind of can tell when a room is somewhat done. So we took the vote and, did the best we could with trying to do cuts we didn't want to do at all for a school we love and thinking of our kids.
So it's a lot of it has to do with the uncertainty with what the future holds.
Sorry, what?
A lot of it has to do with what the future holds, that uncertainty.
I definitely, and just that it was a really, really difficult process making these decisions. Because none of them, there weren't, cuts that, I mean, I guess like, the 100,000 in supplies, I was like, well, that's easy, right? But there weren't many that, you're just like, oh yeah,
Sure.
I mean, it's a really hard decision and a tough position to be in.
Anybody else over here?
I had a quick. So Cody, just to clarify, I know we're saying 500,000 in cuts, but we still have 120,000 kind of untagged, I guess, at this point. Depending on whether that's a staff reduction or not, what is the town looking at ballpark as far as unemployment payment goes that we have to sock away to make sure we can cover that? So I know we're looking at a $200,000 gap, but when we factor in our unemployment that the town is going to pick up, what are we looking at then?
We always budget conservatively to make sure we can cover costs if they're on the higher end. So in doing some estimations, we anticipate about $100,000 in unemployment costs.
So it's essentially for the town, it's not a $200,000 gap, it's a $300,000 gap.
No.
Yes and no. So how we would fund the unemployment would be different than how we would fund the annual operating budget.
Okay.
So unemployment, we would cover through one-time funding, free cash.
Okay.
So we had about $100,000 more than we expected in the free cash, so we will be able to cover the unemployment costs.
Okay.
So it doesn't create an issue there. But if you're looking at big picture, yeah, it isn't a full reduction, right? Because it is resulting in an additional cost to us.
Can I ask a question? If any of our staff that we have unfortunately already had to cut were to get a new job, then we would not incur those unemployment costs, is that correct? Mm-hmm. So we're just planning for worst case scenario, basically.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm just asking though that the obligation, if they were to get a different job, would not be there, because I think that's a question people. Okay.
All right, anybody else from the board, new board? All right, Mr. Weezy, you want to have a comment, question? Hey, could you just, because everything's recorded, I should have said this in the beginning, if you're going to address us, please tell us your name so that it's on the
Height, weight,
record.
the whole thing.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephen Ruisi. I teach at the elementary school. I've been in the town now, employed for 25 years. And I stand here tonight just to talk to you as a teacher. I'm not representing the HTA, the union. The union made their stance at our school committee meeting on Monday night with the displeasures and the realities of the budget process this year. But again, and I've listened to a lot of the insight to this point, it's starting to become clearer. But in the end, how did we get here? How did we not see? How is there not some type of help? I feel very fortunate, at least, that the $200,000 difference between Monday night's 500 budget that was, or the cuts to put into the budget were accepted, and that the Finance Committee seemed willing to at least explore sending the $200,000 to the town or looking for other lines in the item to maybe reconcile that other $200,000. But I'm here to tell you level service. We need level service. It's going to take another $250,000 to get down to level service based on the tiered cuts that were showing up on the screen. Custodian, instrumental band, potential cuts to the specialists, which really haven't been announced yet. Paraprofessionals, maybe 4. The principals, 204-day cut back to 9. Okay, level service should be the goal. I know it's a lot to ask. But again, a couple of the questions I'm going to have is, again, how did we get here? How did we not, special education is always the mystery every year. I've been around this long enough to know you hold your breath, you wait to see what's coming back in, but in the end, it's not the first time we've been through this. So just a couple comments and questions for the committees tonight. I would assume more the Finance Committee. $704,000. That's what the school was asked to cut out of a $7.4 million budget. Okay, 10%. That's outrageous. That's unrealistic to really provide the crown jewel of the town, the education system, to maintain its leverage and its quality of education. It's unrealistic. Okay, without the help of the Silver Lake assessment, okay, we're not going to be able to really get through these cuts without losing programs and staff. I think the committee so far originally was going to say it's imperative for us to reconsider that other $200,000. I think I'm hearing you correctly that you will consider looking for the 200,000 somewhere else, whether it's on the town floor at meeting or looking at the budget line items from the other departments. I've also been told that the town policy is was never to hold the elementary school budget accountable for all the increased costs for special education. Looking at this budget, it looks like the Finance Committee has asked the school to cover all of the increased costs with no help at all. Is that the town's policy still today? That's a question.
So we made a...
Well, I think, just to be clear, the Finance Committee, first of all, is an advisory committee. They have really no authority to do anything other than make recommendations. So that is decided by town meeting, as you know. And so what we're trying to do tonight really is to to get the discussion out now, because we'll have it eventually anyway, and we know we have to address this issue. So we're trying to get as much input from everyone, information from you, from everyone, as to how this might affect or what the issues are. We could really go down the rabbit hole trying to figure out why special education every year is difficult, because it always is. But that's what tonight's really what that meeting is. And so what we have to keep in mind, again, the Finance Committee's doing a really good job, and they're all volunteers. Everybody's a volunteer. They're all trying to do the best we can for the town. And their job is to make a suggestion or a recommendation to town meeting with as much information as possible. So that's what we're trying to do here. So whether there's a policy or not about how special education is funded or not isn't really going to affect how they make their decision. They're going to make their decision based on the information that we get in this forum.
I respect your response, but I still think it's a fair question.
Oh, it is.
That,
again,
it's the largest number I can remember coming back to the elementary school budget that we were to pick up the cost. The planning that goes into it, I don't know if it's from the school end of it when we restructure. I believe DESE only makes recommendations. It's local control whether you decide to go through their suggestions or recommendations to do special education a different way. But ultimately, here we are. It's an enormous amount of money. Typically, it sounds like past practice was to, support the school with special education costs, increased costs from outside the school budget to help at least. And it sounds like there might be a little bit of help tonight with the $200,000 from 500 to 680 to 704, whatever the number is. Thank you. I appreciate that. But another question I had too was, and again, I'm not trying to blame, blame, but here we are. The reality is, I might be standing here losing, 5 figures of my salary because there's maybe poor planning, or maybe there's a priority of spending in the town that wasn't enough, or there wasn't enough vision that this might happen. I don't know. I don't have the answers for that. My question is, I have 2 more. What has been the planning and the foresight to have emergency funds ready for the increases in special education costs? It seems like, again, it happens every year. Do we have an emergency fund? The American Rescue Plan funds that expired, I believe, this fiscal year, were there any money left available put aside to help the town when we face these kind of incurred costs that just appear?
Yeah, we can't utilize ARPA funding for operational costs. That would create a fiscal cliff. It's not eligible to utilize that.
Yeah.
We have a stabilization fund. It's not recommended to dip into that. But we've done a lot of planning. We've created financial forecasting. We've created regular meetings with the administration team to try to catch these things as they come up. And unfortunately, none of us could have seen an 11% increase in education costs coming. We look at trends. The trend is a little over 3% over the past 10 years. So certainly that may vary, right, based on special education, a couple percent, but not to 11%. We couldn't have anticipated.
Again, I go back to, thank you for that information. I go back to that is the town budget, the school budget, being asked to cover all of the incurred costs for special education increases?
No, we've already cut almost over $200,000 of town requests to try to alleviate that.
So of the $704,000 that the school has been asked to cut, is that predominantly made up of increased special education costs?
Yeah.
All right, so that was one question, and then the next question I have is just based on the town spending on the education over the last few years. So Chapter 70 funds have increased. We pointed that out on the pie chart earlier. But overall, the investment the town has made in education has slightly decreased, about 1.5% to 1.8% in the fiscal year 23 to 24. So there's been a priority of not investing enough. And I would probably, again, I don't know the numbers off the top, 1.8%, 1.5% of spending might be the difference for us to be level service. And that's the goal. Custodians already been cut. The school needs the custodians. They're working on bare bones. Paraprofessionals, specialist programs, there'll be programs cut because we're not going to be there the full whole time that we're there to do our job. You know, the principals, everybody's working hard. So I'm not saying that, you know, cuts aren't inevitable, but personnel is something that I don't think we want to touch. Education is the crown jewel in the town. I don't know what the ramifications of this are going to be if, you know, the school committee has to cut personnel. It remains to be seen. It would be a shame that if every effort wasn't made to see if we're already asking for 200,000 plus some unemployment possibly, why not go to 430 to get the full level service? I lied. I have a third question. Have all the other departments in town been given a level service budget that's been approved
There's been
to go to town meeting?
nothing has been approved by the Finance Committee at this point, and I can tell you a lot of departments are less than level service at this point. We've made recommended cuts to...
But nothing's in stone, but they've been asked.
The Finance Committee hasn't voted anything.
We haven't voted anything, and it's been the policy for as long as I've been part of this, so for several years, the departments have been running on bare bones and cutting back every little, you know, dime they can save, so it's been quite the challenge. You know, we're a landlocked town, as you're well aware. You know, over 80% of our income is based on, you know, real estate taxes, so, we have no real business revenue, so it's a real challenge. So, you know, everybody here, I think I speak on behalf of the committee, like, we're in favor of the schools. We would be more than willing to recommend, you know, increases if we could, but the reality is we're, you know, constrained financially, so we need to make some tough decisions. If we don't cut in the school, then it's gonna have to somewhere be cut, or potential layoffs in the town services, and then that impacts the town as a whole as well. Like I said, we're operating off of 35% margin in revenue, which is difficult. You know, if we had approved the full increase, then that would have been reduced to 70% of the budget. The town's budget would have been made up by the school and the fixed costs, like I mentioned before. So it's a real challenge. There's no easy, you know, I definitely appreciate all your comments. You know, but there's no easy decision to be made here, so we do have our work cut out to decide how to...
Just one final comment, thank you for those words, but again, the 1.5% difference in total spending in education with the increased Chapter 70 funding coming in. I mean, again, if we hold the priority line of at least holding the percentage, I think that the numbers could yield a huge impact on, again, achieving level service, which again, I'm thinking from $230,000 more dollars, that would achieve it. But thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
My name is Gordon Laws. I live at 33 Highland. I am the vice chair of the Silver Lake Regional School District School Committee. I hope, Paula, it's okay if I jump up and say a few things. I wanted to kind of distill a few things that I think might not have been totally clear in the sort of back and forth, and my colleagues can correct me if I get any of these wrong, but the restructuring is a definite legal issue. It's not a recommendation. It's a requirement, had to be done. It also doesn't have all that much to do with what the increases are. In fact, the redistribution based on census actually somewhat benefits Halifax and somewhat hurts Kingston. So that gets lost in the shuffle, or it gets lost in the discussion because of how much everything went up. Sarah indicated that that the original budget that she brought in was up by like 13.5%. And
18.9.
that's what it started with originally, and then it came back to 13.5, and then and so forth. So what was behind that? What are the big things that were behind that? The first big issue behind that was the level of state funding. It did not go up in the percentage expectation, and that is a statewide issue. You can go look in articles in the Boston Globe and the Patriot Ledger and other things like that. School districts all around us are facing exactly that kind of issue. The magnitude sort of varies and it differs, but it's a huge problem. We are actually fortunate that the president of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees is on the Silver Lake Committee. And so he gets like, he's in with all the, like legislative, and so he's in lobbying about this issue and expressing how serious it is and how serious it is to the schools. So that's the first and the biggest issue. The second issue is special education. It did absolutely go up, and it went up in terms of inflationary pressures. So the state authorized increases to special education transportation to the tune of about 15%. So provider services and everything like that went way up. The volume of services that we are having to offer right now also went up. The number of kids that we have going into IEPs and out-of-district placements both went up, both in the town and in the school district. Now, I say that because some of the questions were, what were the cuts that were sort of undecided and over at Halifax? And some of the debate was around what is the most optimal thing to do for the general population and special education. So you had on the table, and in a really, I mean, this is dark stuff to have to debate with. Do we cut interventionists whose specialty is to try to level up reading levels, math levels, to try to help cut down on behavioral issues so the kids stay in classes and that sort of thing, and try to keep them from tipping into needing extra interventions and extra services? Or do we cut classroom teachers? And we have varying levels of classroom sizes in the elementary school, ranging from a low of about 17 to a high of about 23, 24, or maybe it's 25 or 26 in the 6th grades. And so that's what a ton of the debate was about, is what was sort of the most optimal model that would help us to, if not roll back some of what we're spending in special education, at least hold kind of where we are. The committee, the whole group, they didn't really get settled on what was sort of the best model of that. They wound up voting a number. The administration still has to figure out which of about, $120,000 that was not kind of in a specific tier is going to come out of that. And so there is still some kind of discussion that the administration has to settle on what's the best thing to do about that. And then if you go further for that additional $200,000, sort of the debate of what that is do you trade classroom teachers or specialists? So that's really what it comes down to, if I understood correctly and if I, looked at everything correctly. So when you're debating, if you're saying to yourself, we're going to tell the schools you have to take the $200,000 down, essentially what you're saying to the schools is, well, we take no position. You must decide between interventionists and classroom teachers, or a little bit of a mixture of both. Did I get any of that wrong? Okay.
Well, that's helpful. But again, this is the purpose of this meeting tonight, is so that the people that are charged with trying to put together a sensible budget for the town based on I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You got this much to work with, you got this many requests. And that kind of comment is very helpful. At least it allows the advisory people to give it consideration, so that's helpful. Does anyone else have any comments? Yes, sir, come on up front.
Hi, thank you for listening to me tonight. My name is Scott Howe. I'm a 6th grade teacher at Halifax Elementary. It's my 12th year. I've probably been working at Halifax for 13 or 14, though, other than a classroom teacher. I just wanted to talk about some of the places that maybe could be cut, because I recognize there are things that have to be cut, obviously, with a budget of this magnitude that's out of balance. I appreciated what Mr. Laws said. I think classroom teachers are like the absolute last place you should be looking to cut. We're talking about interventionists who are not trained with college education to do what teachers have to be able to do. We're talking about highly qualified teachers versus other people. But I think that neither one of those necessarily needs to be the first cuts. I would ask the Finance Committee and the School Committee to look at other places to cut the budget. And I think there is a place to look. And I think it's upper administration in central office. I want you to ask central office how many jobs have been created in the last few years that were not there before. How much that costs Halifax and why those jobs are needed. The last thing that we should be getting rid of is teachers in front of students. We need to help these students. We need to be there for them. They're so important. This is why I went into this career, is because I love kids. And I want to see the kids get the services they need. I don't want to see classrooms of 26 or 27 students. I know it happens sometimes. It's very difficult to get to every kid. Imagine being a teacher and you want to help a child to be a better writer, but you can't get to them, literally, because there's too many kids in the classroom, and you can't get to every kid. So I ask you to look at upper administration first, central office, and figure out where those jobs have come from, if they're needed. Thank you for your time tonight.
All right, thank you.
Just a quick, well, go ahead.
Paula?
Sure.
We run...
Wait, well, if you'd please have a seat. So what I don't want to have is
I don't want to talk
back and forth.
No, I don't. I just wanted to make a statement.
Yeah, so you have. And let me have Mrs. Hack say what she's going to say.
Just make a point for clarity. Just want to be clear to folks as well as the Finance Committee doesn't specify what needs to be cut. We're just approving a dollar figure. So as far as, where the actual number comes from, whether it's staff, aides, wherever, supplies, that's all, at the autonomy of the school committee. So I just want to make that clear. We're not deciding to make any cuts to any employees or staffing. And definitely for all the teachers in the room, we certainly appreciate and applaud your work. We understand in society it's definitely an underappreciated position. And so, we thank you for all you do, and we certainly don't want to see anybody to be cut. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you, Todd.
I just want to state a little something about central office. I've been on school committees now for probably 17, 18 years now. When I first started, we had 2 assistant superintendents. We're down to 1. When I first started, we had an assistant to the director of financial services. We never replaced that when Christine Healy moved up to replace John Tuffy. Education has gotten more challenging. Reporting has gotten more challenging. The breadth and scope of what central office must carry day to day has gotten more burdensome and has grown exponentially over the years. Our auditors, for a second year in a row, have noted in their management letter back to the school committee that our accounting department is understaffed. This year, they highlighted it to us as a very serious concern, and we don't have the funds to staff any further in that department. So I just want to give you a sense for central office is not overstaffed. They're a very lean team that tries to do the best they can with the assets they have.
Okay, thank you. Just to echo what Todd said, is that school committee, the school budget to the town, to us voters, when we get to town meeting, is just one number. So we say yes or no, and then if it's yes, they do what they want with it. If it's no, they still do what they want with it. I mean, we can't, we can recommend. And the reason I asked the question earlier, and I'm glad that you brought it up, was just so that the advisory people, the finance committee, have the opportunity to at least know what the potential impact could be of a change in the number. That's important to us, but as far as how it's administered, that's entirely up to the school board. So, does anyone else have any comments for us or questions? Okay.
One thing that may be worth mentioning is, so obviously we're looking at about a $200,000 deficit right now. And I guess it's more of a question to the school committee or administration. So we've budgeted, or in the budget, of $156,500 for vocational education and transportation. I believe we only have one student who utilizes this. I think we pay about $28,000 in tuition, and then maybe another 15 or 20 in transportation. So would it be reasonable, to try to reduce that to 100,000? Reduce 100,000 from there, and then our deficit's only 100,000, and then there's no further impact on services. Just throwing it out there. That's been considered, or an opportunity.
I apologize that for the past few months, every time we've talked about this, we've talked about how students have until April 1st to make a decision whether they're going to be attending. There were a number of applicants, and I've been hopping pretty much every single day. I did get to bed before midnight the past 2 nights, though. So yes, that is a place where we do anticipate we're going to be making cuts. And I apologize that I'm only thinking about it now.
That's okay.
Do we know how many students we have at the current, or we're still?
I can find out.
That'd be great.
Okay. You have any other comments?
So just one student, I'm sorry, isn't it?
I believe so. April 1st was the deadline.
Yeah, okay.
It's been one for the past couple of years, so we...
Yes, because we did receive an invoice basically from the Norfolk school there that stated there was just one student, so I'm pretty sure that that's accurate figure.
What I'm checking on is that for the vocational schools, we did have a family that reached out. They are moving to Halifax. The child attends South Shore Vocational Program. We are required to pay for South Shore Vocational because Silver Lake doesn't have an electrical program. I'm just going to pull up the spreadsheet from the assistant superintendent's office and just go through the confirmed numbers. I don't know if they're actually in there yet, but that is something that I do need to look at.
Okay, fair enough.
Give you an estimate shortly.
Thank you.
Hi, Karen Fava, 66 Clyde Bosworth. My question is, do we know what the cost is per student right now?
Per student?
Per pupil expenditures are always calculated 2 years afterwards. So the school business manager in every school in September puts together what's called an end-of-year report. The end-of-year report is submitted to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and then it has to be audited, and the audits are due at the end of March, and so then in July, the Department of Education will take the October 1 enrollments and divide the amount paid in the school district by the October 1 enrollments to calculate the per pupil expenditure. So if you go to the Department of Education website, you will see that they have the 2022 enrollment numbers, because even though the deadline to get your audit in is March 31st, there's a lot of places that don't actually get it in on time, and so it's really around July.
Okay, so basically we're running 2 years behind on the cost of a student when we're trying to figure out the budgets. And correct me if I'm wrong, but COVID, I know personally, has had a huge impact on the students that need extra services, right, IEPs. That is the increase that we're seeing that we weren't ready for. And now these children are suffering, and we want to take away those resources from these children to not fund that, but we'll fund other things. And to me, I just can't see that, because we're failing our students. We really are. At this point, these kids are not going to be able to go up to the junior high and be able to meet expectations, and that's sad. And when they get to the junior high, if you have to cut from there, same difference. Or high school, we're really not serving our children, and we need to find a way to do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions for this night?
Can I respond?
Oh, yeah, please.
Our test scores don't indicate that at the elementary school. I mean, I know there are children receiving services, which is absolutely necessary, and we want to provide everything we can. But I wouldn't say, I mean, just as an opinion, I wouldn't say our schools are failing our children at this at all, because Massachusetts has the best schools in the nation, and we have incredible curriculum, incredible teachers. We talk about their test scores at school committee meetings all the time. We're keeping an eye on it all the time, and it's just...
But it's also a year behind.
No, it's not a year behind. The scores we talk about are current. They were done like a month ago. The stars and dibbles testing we do, that I don't do it, sorry, you. But what we are reported on at the school committee, we pay a lot of attention to how the students are doing and ask all the time how student achievement is at the school. And not just achievement, but also how are things going with behaviors, how is discipline going? Because we want the school to be a wonderful place for our children. And I do feel our teachers do a tremendous job.
I'm not saying the teachers don't do a great job. I think they do a remarkable job.
Okay, Karen, I don't want to debate if it's, that's, what we're trying to do is get as much information, so we got your points. I think we've got the points from there too, so. All right, does anyone else have any comments for Finance Committee or anything about this budget coming up? All right.
John, I just have one question. I think at some point there were conversations at the administration level about wage freezes for where we are right now versus going increases for next year. Is that true or no at the administration level?
That came up at the Silver Lake meeting. It was met with mild acceptance levels, with a lot of questions and maybe some renegotiation suggestions wanted. Unofficially, and it wasn't a vote by the school committee, we asked them to look at that. At Monday's meeting, we're probably going to announce that we're not moving forward with that. There wasn't enough appetite, and it would have been difficult to apply fairly. So that's not going to be a place where we're going to see any relief.
Have we tried to have additional conversations about that, or was the only ask the initial ask?
We only asked if it could be looked at. We have not had any more conversation around it officially as a committee.
Okay, so I assume you're not going to vote tonight? You're going to take this up on Monday?
There certainly needs to be further discussion on the budget as a whole, but if you want to let the school go, if everyone...
Oh, you want to go back into the budget now?
We need to definitely go back into the budget.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we're gonna switch gears then? We're gonna talk about the, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the
That's all right.
records from the Assistant Superintendent's office show that the one student from Halifax in a vocational program is continuing in the program, and there is that one person moving in. So we budgeted 5, there will be 2 attending, and that is a savings of $93,900.
Well, that's helpful.
So,
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to leave the school department now. We're just going to talk now about the rest of the warrant. And just you folks are welcome
Well,
to stay.
actually, John, before we do that, actually, I'd like to give the school an opportunity just to, because they put in for a full-time school officer, school resource officer, so we haven't received,
They put in for part-time.
it currently is part-time, right? And they wanted it full-time?
No, that's to continue to keep it part-time.
Okay. So what was the 78?
That's the total amount, with Plimpton paying part of it. So we pay 2/3, then Plimpton pays 2/3.
So that,
Sorry, go ahead.
the school resource officer warrant article will be on the April 9th school committee.
So to be
Agenda?
clear, the ask is there just to keep it as a part-time, not to increase it to a full-time? Because I think there was some
I believe the recommendation is going to be to keep it as a part-time.
Okay.
But where the school committee hasn't voted, I can't say for certain.
Okay, go ahead.
John,
Okay.
before you move on, I personally want to say thank you to the school committee and to the teaching staff, everyone that's been involved with this process. I know it's been painstakingly difficult to make some of the decisions that you've had to make, and we would be remiss if we didn't recognize you for those efforts, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, are we ready to go on to the rest of it? All right. You folks are more than welcome to stay, as is everybody else. Thank you very much. You want to take a 2-minute recess? Yeah. Why don't we take a 3-minute recess? Sure. Session before it gets too late, so we'll start where we're now going to pick up on the rest of the town budget. Just give us an overview, Cody, or?
Yep, I can definitely do that.
Hey, we're back in session.
Here we go. Walter.
So, at this point, really what we need is direction from the Finance Committee on how you want to handle this. And that way there we can work through a plan over the next couple days, because Monday is the last possible day for you guys to vote a budget, vote everything for the warrant. The Board of Selectmen are meeting on Tuesday to vote the warrant as a whole, and then our plan is literally to send it to print Wednesday, to the print shop on Wednesday.
Yeah, so, my recommendation would be, it was great news that, we found the extra 90,000, right? So that makes the divide 110. Which we know we've kind of scraped down the budgets to the bare bones, and, we've done that proactively, right? With the 10% cut off of all the budget requests. So we've already kind of analyzed that and know we're really down to as bare as we can get. I do think it's fair, though, for us to try to come a little further and meet them in the middle would be my recommendation. So the divide is 110. That makes up 55 each if you split it down the middle. I would like to move that we come up with an additional 60,000, and then their portion would be 50 flat of additional cuts. The additional 60, I would ask Cody to take a look. He did provide previously a few ideas. I think there's a few other areas we can kind of probe a little bit just deeper and see how we can come up with the 60. But I would recommend that we ask Cody to come up with that recommendation for the additional 60 for review and vote, final vote on Monday. But that would be that's what I would move, I guess, that we cover 60 and then the school picks up the additional 50 request. So any comments from folks?
I think it sounds reasonable.
I think we can, Sandy and I will work, we've proactively been working, but I think we can develop a plan for 60,000 that will have no impact on services to our departments, which is important. There's some strategic ways that we can look at things, funding things a little bit differently, some of which you see here, but I'm confident that we can do so without cutting any departmental budgets where it would have an impact on anything.
That's great. Good. All right, that's a start. Next step is capital plan. We'll talk about that.
So is that what, is the Finance Committee in agreement? Just so I know where to work,
Maybe we should take a vote, I guess.
on that?
Yeah.
Stipulate what we're talking about here again.
So our divide, so we asked them to come back on, what, $700,000 in cuts. They had the 3 tiers proposed, which is in that presentation, right? So they approved essentially, so they didn't actually directly follow that, right? The numbers are slightly off. they basically just did line item, right? So they said, okay, we'll cut 500,000. That left a divide of 200,000 that we needed to solve for, right? That was really the objective of tonight's meeting. You know, through discussion, we were able to find an additional $90,000 in savings through the vocational education. That now brings the divide down to 110,000. So my proposal is that we again, split that.
Split the 110.
110 with them, not directly even though we take 60%, they take 50. We take 60,000, they pay 50,000 instead of 55, 56 or
Why
whatever.
is that?
Just to kind of meet them in the middle. I mean, we could say 55, but I just trying to.
I think in what Todd and I were briefly discussing, we can identify 60,000 without, like I said, without an impact to any of our departments, and so just the 60,000 is an even number.
Yeah, just to cut it evenly, so additional, so they'll have to come up with, so instead of the 500, so their number would then move to 550, and so that's really the basis for it, right? Just to even clean numbers, if you will. And then we find the additional 60, some of which were kind of laid out in the email that Cody had, just some thoughts, but I think there's a couple other areas we can kick the tires on and maybe to come up with the 60, again, with no impact and having to cut any staff or anything of that nature. So that's the proposal, I guess. So what does the committee think of that? Any concerns? You think that's fair?
It's reasonable, yeah, I think that's reasonable to do, given the scenario that we can not have to have any great impact on our services. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. I'm for it.
And it's overall a minimal, the minimalist impact to the school, right? Being that they cut the 500, and we plan for that, so we're asking them for another 50 versus 200,000, which,
Right.
Well,
I get it. Yeah, I'm good with the 60.
Okay, all right, so would somebody like to make a motion then to?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, motion carries 7-0. So yeah, I guess if you could.
We'll have you a plan in your email tomorrow.
Okay, awesome.
Good. And then we can deal with that on Monday.
Correct, yeah, we'll vote.
Final.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say if there's any individual comment, concern based on what I'm presenting, let me know ahead of time so I can address it and have everything ready for you on Monday. Because like I said, we have to have that budget voted on Monday.
Yeah, Cody, the only thing, and we've all talked about this, I mean, Jim and Todd have spent a ton of time on this process this year, and if there are opportunities for us to better this process moving forward, specifically as it relates to the schools, I think that's something that we really have to try to get behind now. Versus waiting to the turn of the fiscal year, because we're going to be up against this, no matter what anyone thinks, we're going to be up against this again next year.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
And, we certainly have to be in a better position to deal with it than we were this year.
I agree. It's one of the things I identified early on here, that it was a concern, which is we implemented a new process, on our end. We actually did, I thought, a nice job on the town's end this year. I mean, we were really done with our budgets in February. We pretty much spent March just waiting to see what the school was going to do.
Yeah, and some of it could be having to engage DESI more often or whatever it is, because I think the school committee, I don't think it's their fault.
No, absolutely not.
We are where we are, but the state's got to be more proactive with some of this stuff, and we've got to try to lead that effort as much as we can.
Yeah, like we've implemented these monthly meetings with the administration. I'm hopeful and confident that that'll only continue to help this process. We just implemented it in the fall, so we'll be full steam ahead. We're going to continue those, and as these things come up, I've said to them, we want to start the fiscal 26 budget literally as soon as the fiscal 25 budget passes. Right. So that's the plan.
Can they give us an idea on the IEP headcounts for next year? Because I believe at the committee meeting that we were at the school a couple of weeks ago, somebody said something like 180 new IEPs were incoming, which is, given what we have now versus an additional 180, which now is becoming money that is locked in according to the regulations that we're burdened under. So I think that would be a great place to start when in July, after we get this all squared away, because that's going to be the impact. Yes, we only have to find $60,000 as an organization. However, we're only kicking the can down the road to a bigger issue next year.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I do think part of the challenge is I know that sometimes come September, that number will increase. You know, they'll see, you know, how a child is doing after summer, and you sometimes get that September influx. So I know we want to get the numbers as quick as we can, but we also have to brace for even greater numbers, you know, in September. That's how it goes. But I personally want to thank you guys. I'm very proud of our finance committee. You guys ask great questions. You guys do a fantastic job. You're all engaged. You're all plugged in. And thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
We need them to vote. You guys still got to vote. I think you had a motion. Did you already vote?
They voted.
Oh, you voted. God, sorry.
7-0.
Before we go on, I just want to mention with the school budget, because we want to be proactive, right? Next year, we are looking at somewhere, without any town increases, just to the schools, we are looking at between a $750,000 to $1 million increase, just for the schools for next year.
That's over the 40 million right now, which is the 24-25 budget.
For our cost of education. Based on fiscal 25, additional cost for fiscal 26, based, you know, just projecting, is somewhere in the range of $750,000 to $1 million, just in education costs. We had $800,000 in new revenue this year, so that, just to give you an idea, and that's without any town increases, you know. And a big part of that is, again, just using a 3% increase on 15 million, that's $450,000. But then we're losing that circuit breaker money. So somewhere in the range of $300,000 to $500,000 that is helping to offset our elementary school budget this year is going to go to Silver Lake next year. And you typically would say, okay, that's fine, it'll just be a reallocation. But they're using one-time funding this year to offset their budget with the idea that they're going to have that money next year. So we're not going to see any relief from that next year. So we can anticipate, at a minimum, that's if they just come in at a 3%, somewhere, and depending on what the circuit breaker is, somewhere in the range of $750,000 to $1 million just for the schools next year.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Kindergarten, we do not have a Halifax, their own little kindergarten?
No, we have kindergarten.
We have kindergarten. No, we have kindergarten.
It's pre-K.
Is it here in Halifax?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's talking about the pre-K.
And that's not in Halifax?
That's regional.
That's regional.
Why? If we have a kindergarten, don't we have a pre-K?
I think it was a cost. It was a cost thing of running our own program would have been more costly than to regionalize to run all three.
Okay. I guess it makes sense. Okay.
Okay. Moving on.
Okay, so any other questions on operating budget? Any questions that the finance committee has that I can, operating budget wise, that I can address or get information for Monday?
Well, I want to talk about a couple things from Monday night if we can.
For like just topical areas?
Huh?
For the agenda, you mean? Or?
No, for what we talked about last meeting.
In regards to what?
ARPA funding.
The capital,
we can get to.
Okay.
If there's anything on operating budget.
Okay.
So the operating budget is, so we reviewed that just as a refresher, right? Everybody was comfortable, nothing's changing. There will be a slight change being the 60,000 that we just need to pull from. So outside of that though, is everybody comfortable with the budget? Any additional questions or? No? Okay. So,
okay, I will pull up the capital stuff.
So yeah, next up, Frank, is the capital. So we want to go through the items we didn't cover, and then we can also talk
some
about
of that capital may go into, I was looking at putting it in operating.
I wouldn't recommend it. I definitely wouldn't recommend that. That would be against our financial policies as well. We don't use one-time money.
It's frowned upon to do that, so it's not I don't think we want to put on that. But we should. But the good news is we shouldn't have to. So, but we can discuss that in a minute.
No, we didn't last year.
You have capital now, right, Cody?
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to pull it up on the screen.
Did you document in your screen?
Yeah, what's recommended.
That's an actually.
So just as a recap, Capital Planning Committee met. We had a little over $2.1 million in requests for fiscal '25. Capital Planning Committee voted, you can see here, partially to fund the structural gear for the fire department, to fund the fire department mold remediation, 2 new police vehicles, $300,000 in road maintenance, and then $500,000 in water treatment plant upgrades, and $25,000 for the mini excavator for the water department, which both would come out of retained earnings. And then the other things, the idea was to utilize ARPA for.
So I think one of the, and I see Chief Williams here, so maybe it'd be appropriate if you wouldn't mind, Chief, just come up and just, because it's a lot of questions were kind of surrounding the structural gear, right? So maybe if you could just hit on the condition of the gear today. What we've kind of approved through the capital planning was the 12 sets and then the 2 additional through the other funding, but essentially the 12 sets, which we plan on directly funding. That will be one outfit per full-time employee. But if you could just kind of explain the larger plan and the larger need for the 2 sets of gear for your staff, I guess would be helpful for the committee.
Sure. Introduce myself, Mike Whalen, the fire chief. So I did put a request in for, I believe it was $173,600 for gear. One of the things that I evaluated as the fire chief when I got into, obviously, into the position I'm in, looked at a lot of things, including some of the gear that we have in place currently today. So what I did is, I looked at individual gear that we had and found some pretty significant deficits in the gear that we have. So the gear has a shelf life of 10 years, and the majority of our gear now is right at that limit. I would say that a good portion, probably 90% of it, in the next 3 to 4 years will be at its limit. I know you're saying you approved 10 sets, but when you guys are thinking 10 sets, I think something totally different because of the fact that some people may have in their set of gear, what I mean by that is their helmet, their gloves, coat, boots, pants, everything else. One of the sets that they have may have, and I'm using numbers, a coat that's from 2007, but pants that are from 2010. So when you're saying I can outfit 12 people, that may not be the case. When I go back, I might have to look at who has what and what's going to expire or is expired now. And then one person may have a new coat with old pants and vice versa on the other side. So you're saying 12 sets, but that may not be the case. The ultimate goal, what I'm trying to do is not to come to you in 10 years and say, hey, I need $173,000. What I'm trying to do is get on a rotation so that each year we get 6 sets of gear, okay? And obviously that'd be, it's $6,200, $36,000 compared to $173,000. So I'm trying to get 6 sets each year. The only way to pretty much reset this and to start over and to get to the position you want to get is to fund full sets of gear for everyone right now and then start that process over. This will not give everybody 2 sets of gear. I listened, I heard something from the meeting the other night that, why do they need 2 sets of gear? This will not give everybody 2 sets of gear. Will some people have 2 sets of gear for a short period of time? Yes. Eventually, my goal is to have everyone have 2 sets of gear, okay? And what I mean by that is, to start out right now, we'll have 1 set of gear that's compliant. Someone's gear that's going to expire in 2 years from now, yes, they will have a set of gear for 2 years. Or 2 sets of gear, excuse me, for 2 years. And after that, when the gear expires, we get rid of that. They're down to 1 set of gear. The issue that I have with our members having 1 set of gear, if we go to a fire and we come back, they need to wash that gear. That is an SOP. It's a standard for a National Fire Protection Agency. Across the board, everybody uses the same exact thing, okay? One of the leading causes of firefighter fatalities right now is cancer. And they're putting millions and millions of dollars into research and development and everything else. So much so that the state has been out to our department to do free cancer screening on our members. It was offered to all the guys, anybody that wanted a free cancer screening, and they're doing it across Massachusetts to all the fire departments. They've gone so far as to say that even some of the studies that are going on right now, that they don't want members wearing their gear in the building whatsoever. Our policy at our department is only in the apparatus bay. They don't go into offices with their gear on. They don't go into living quarters with their gear on or anything like that. The majority of the departments around now have policies in place that when they go to a fire, they take their gear up, put it in a bag, put it outside the department, drive back to the station. All of that stuff goes into the washers and dryers, gets cleaned, it gets put back into service, and they grab their 2nd set of gear. Now, keep this in mind, with one set of gear, we have a fire, they wash their gear, we get a next call, we have nothing. Currently, what I'm doing is I have certain sets of gear that are upstairs, yes, they are expired, but I don't have any other choice at this point. So they may grab whatever fits them or comes close to fitting them and utilize that gear to go on the next call, okay? So my proposal, I understand it's quite a cost, but the only way to do this is to start off again by getting everybody a set of gear and then working towards, obviously, a second set of gear in the future. By doing the 6 sets of gear, it'll probably take me 6 years, probably 7 years by the time it rotates all the way through that everybody will have 2 sets of gear. But I think keeping the cost down and knowing that it's coming each year and being able to predict it would be a lot easier. So that's my ultimate goal. We do have individualized gear washes and dryers that are only used for gear. That are specialized for gear, the heavy-duty machines and everything else. We use specific detergents and everything like that. And the standards are getting worse and worse and worse. The studies now are even showing that the life expectancy of the 10 years is even being cut down because they want us to wash our gear so much. Kind of a little bit of a difficult situation in the sense that you want us to wash them, but yet every time you wash it, you deplete the protective barriers that you have on the gear and everything else. So we're seeing the majority of our gear right now, like I said, a good portion of our department would probably be 100% non-compliant within 3 to 4 years. There are some people that have coats that are in compliancy right now, but don't have helmets or boots or anything like that. Gloves, everything is labeled for 10 years. Whether it's brand new, sitting in the closet, and you just pull it out on the 9th year and started using it, 10 years they're gone. Right? So the problem that we have is we do a large turnover. Pay scale is okay, but compared to surrounding communities, we're lower than everyone else. The insurance is a little bit higher here, obviously, than everyone else, so that we have a lot of turnover. A set of gear is custom made to each individual person. All right, so if I come in my size and you get someone else that comes in, I leave, someone else that comes in that's a lot smaller, I can't utilize that gear. All right, so it may go back into the closet until I find someone that comes close to fitting him. The problem with having a set of gear on that's way too big, obviously if you wear something that's way too big, you're not protected. You have fire that goes in there, heat goes in there, things like that. Too small, same as that. So having a proper fitting set of gear is essential. All right, so that's why I requested, to have all of the gear. Right now, I did put in for 28 sets. I did hire 3 more people, but 2 of them fell through. So I could probably get away with 26 sets. I know you're saying 12 sets, we had 2 left over, but that still, in the long run, would create issues because I would have 1 member with a brand new set of gear, and we could run into issues with liability in the sense that we offered you a new set of gear, we give you a brand new coat, but you have old pants. So if the protection was there for the new pair of pants, the new coat, and you got burnt because of your pants, it could be a liability issue. Just so you.
No, it's very helpful, Chief. Thank you very much for giving us the background there. I guess any questions from anyone?
I have a question. So of the sets of gear that you have, what's expiring? What is expired? Account. What's expired and what is going to expire? And if you have that a breakdown over the next couple of years.
I do have that breakdown. So I have everything with me tonight. But the majority of the gear, like I said, is the gear right now that's currently not compliant? Yes, there is.
I don't dispute that. I'm just trying to understand the numbers.
I think that right now I probably have, off the top of my head, I think I have 3 members that have compliant gear that is brand new.
So that's 12, that's 6 sets that are compliant?
No, that's 3. That's 3 sets. I have 3 members that are compliant.
With 2 sets apiece?
No, nobody has 2 sets. Nobody has
That's a long-term goal.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
The idea of this being their second set, yes, it would be until their gear is non-compliant, then we throw that away.
Okay.
That's the way it goes. So eventually, after the 7th year of getting 6 sets after this, then members would have 2 sets of gear. But until then, nobody will have 2 sets of gear if they're not compliant.
Chief, thanks for all that you do. What is the standard kind of across other departments? Do most other departments have 2 sets of gear that they work off?
When I left Pembroke,
Yeah.
walking through the door, they gave me 2 sets of gear.
Really? Okay.
I did that research today, they do. They all have 2 sets, they all get the machines to wash them, yep. I was wrong.
The issue that we run into is obviously, like, even if you try, you go out, your gear gets wet, you know, you go any scene now, the particulars, the gases, the vapors, everything else gets into your gear. They're looking at more so even getting back into the truck with that gear on. You get back into the truck, you go back to the station, you wash up, you put regular clothes on like this, your duty clothes, you get back in that truck, you grab the next call, you're touching everything, and you're sitting in everything that it was supposed to do to begin with. And it even goes as far as kids coming by the station, they sit in the trucks. You're exposing them as well. So by having 2 sets of gear, we could utilize, you know, other techniques on scene to, you know, right now we have special wipes, we wipe it down, wipe your face down, wipe your hands down, you get out of your gear, you put it in a bag, you know, we could come up with other ways to make it safer in the fire service. And a lot of towns already have, but yes, to answer your question, the majority of the towns do it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief while he's here? Okay, so the cost of each of the sets of gear is $6,200, so the request from the chief was certainly much larger than that because he's, you know, trying to outfit his company, but what the capital plan had recommended is the 12 sets, so that's that makes up the $74,000 there, 6,200 times 12. So that's what was recommended from the capital planning committee.
And then 2 additional with the earmark.
Yeah, through the other funding, yeah, but from a free cash perspective, it's just the 12 for the 74K. So I guess maybe we should go to a vote on that, I guess. Any other discussion, I guess, before we take a vote? Or?
You may want to go through each of the items first, because we only have so much money. So if you're going to make changes, you need to figure out where you're...
Okay, fair point.
I don't think they even have to vote tonight.
No, they don't have to, but it's just a matter of getting the information out there, so if we have more questions, we can get the answers.
Okay. So the next item was actually the mold. Yeah, I think we're all good for you. Well, the next one does kind of touch on you with the mold issue, I guess, but it's really more...
Scott Materna has been handling that. So thank you for your email. Todd had mentioned that there was questions on the bidding process and proposals. So we legally aren't supposed to go out to bid until we have the funding earmarked or appropriated. So we have not gone out to bid for this. Scott has brought down a few different companies to get proposals. So he's gotten either 2 or 3 proposals, which have come in a little under the 100. And I asked him to increase it to the 100 in case we do go out to bid and it comes in a little bit higher, that we're not scrambling for money again.
So I think the question, Cody, that we had on this particular item was not necessarily whether or not it went out to bid, but it was the research that was done to know the existing conditions. Did they peel back the onion, so to speak, or are they only looking at known concerns that are in existence today? Or, because we don't want them to start doing the work and then discover there's more problems and that 100,000 turns into 200,000. So that was more our question, less the bid cycle.
They've definitely done some of the research, and I think Chief can comment, but it's primarily in the bathroom, and they've looked at it. They anticipate the remediation itself isn't what's going to cost tons of money. It's the rebuild of having to put the bathroom back together, basically.
Yeah.
So when the company did come in, they did do a full evaluation of the building itself.
Okay.
The key areas that they focused in on were upstairs in one of the front areas. In the back, on the 2nd story, in the back area there, that was kind of minor. There was more damage there, and they weren't sure as far as a lot of damage that was going in there causing some of the issues. And downstairs in the 2 bathrooms as well. So the Cody said that they think it's not really the remediation part of it, it's kind of getting to it, remediate it, put everything back together is what the initial process was. But yes, to answer your question, the company came in, did full monitoring, air quality monitoring, and did look through everything.
So we used a certified hygienist to do that?
Yes, a specialized company came in.
Right.
Independent company did come in and do evaluation.
And then they wrote a scope of work to get a quote for?
Yes, absolutely.
So the vendors are quoting off of the CIH's recommendations for the cleaning?
I believe Scott's been handling that. I can't speak for Scott, but I believe that they were handed what was found and the full reports.
That's typically how it works.
Yes.
Right.
Usually, yes.
Yep.
And we did contact the insurance company to see if this is a claim. It's not.
So we can't get any relief through our insurance for the remediation. What about the putback?
No, because there isn't a specific, there wasn't a claim to put in. It's because of the mold that we'd have to do the putback.
So our insurance excludes mold?
Most of them do. most property damage insurance would.
All right, well, thanks again, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, so, yeah, so let's just take a vote on Monday, I guess, that you folks can digest it. You know, there's been a lot of stuff going around tonight, so let's digest it. We can vote on Monday's meeting. That takes care of the capital planning committee recommendations for the capital budget. The other two items of discussion or concern that were raised were in relation to the opera funding, which is really more of a selectman decision. So I think there was some question on the wood chipper being utilized through the opera funding.
The reason, this was my recommendation, my plan is to bring it to the Board of Selectmen. This was, you may recall, this was on the capital plan last year. Steve, our highway surveyor, brought it forward again this year. The current chipper is only, is in worse shape than it was previously. And I think Steve's concern, speaking with him, is if it's not replaced this year, either significantly increased maintenance cost of it, or we may not be able to offer some of like the service that we will, the brush, people can put out their brush and we'll pick it up and things like that. So in order to just get creative, in order to try to fund these things, the thought was we have that ARPA funding left, it's there for things like this, we need to utilize it. So it was a recommendation to try to fund as much as we could through the capital plan in recognition of our limited free cash this year.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, that he also said that when they do their own tree work, if we don't have a chipper, they have to have Newcomb or somebody else come in and do it. So in the long run, it's cheaper to run it themselves.
So what is the maintenance cost on the chipper this year?
I'm not sure, Jim.
Okay.
We have to ask.
Has it broken? Has it been in for a ton of repairs? I mean, is there a real need? I mean, my understanding at this point is that the excavator has a chipper attachment with it. Is that correct? The new excavator they got last year.
No, it's a flail mower. It's like what you see on the side of the road. A wood chipper is what you throw a log into.
I'm aware of what a wood chipper is, thanks. I know what it's saying. My concern is
it's a flail mower. It's two different things.
So there isn't a chipper attachment?
No, it's a flail mower.
So just a flat deck, 70, however many inches?
Nope, it spins with chains, and it pushes back brush off the side of the road.
They drive by and
you cannot stick a log through it.
Right, but we're taking $84,000 in ARPA money and putting it in a wood chipper, and we're in a tight budget this year. And why can't we move $60,000 of that ARPA money up into the police department, buy a cruiser with that, take $60,000 out of that and put it into free cash?
You could. What would you want to use that additional free cash for?
$24,000 could go into the structural gear and reduce that free cash that's into that structural gear by $24,000, and we end up with $84,000 back in free cash.
So we're already using, the 74.4 is already all free cash for the structural gear.
Can you use ARPA for free gear, for the structural gear?
You certainly could.
So, yeah, I think that I gotta digest it a little bit myself, because I after hearing Chief talk, I remember John asking me a question when I got sworn into this role, that what my priorities were, and public safety was top of the list. And after hearing Chief talk, I definitely am rethinking how this all looks on paper now.
So just to be clear though, right, so it's two separate things. That's why I wanted to make the distinction with the ARPA funds being through the selectmen. So we as a finance committee are only approving or recommending, or not recommending for that matter, the capital plan budget. The ARPA funding is totally separate. So it's not like you can say, we want to move X, Y, and Z because the capital planning committee's already made the recommendation, so it's either a yes or no.
Yeah, for me, the dots are connecting though here. So I'm looking at the mini excavator right now, which is under capital, right? And so I know that that's been operating year over year already. It's already in place. We're not going out and buying it. It's going from department to department, correct? So if you really dissect this, I would be curious to see what would happen if we took that out, left the conditions are the way that they are now.
Well, that's different. The mini excavator is their purchase from
the other department. Yeah. But if you remove that from this capital
that's what I'm saying is it's already been approved. It's already been recommended. So we're only yeah, that's coming from the.
So water retained. So we have two. Basically, you have free cash, which is surplus revenue for the general fund. And that, any of our general government departments, you would utilize that funding for capital. So public safety, any highway, whatever it may be. And then you have enterprise funds, which primarily in Halifax is your water department and your solid waste. They have their own free cash, basically, which is their retained earnings. And so when we fund items for the water department, we utilize the water department retained earnings. So for instance, if you were to pull that 25,000 out, you wouldn't be given an additional 25,000 to allocate somewhere else.
It just sits in the water.
It has to go towards the water department. And they have a 1.3 or 1.4 million available right now. The free cash, which we have allocated about 600,000 here, is what we have to play with for the general government stuff.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, so it's the road maintenance up, basically.
Yeah, tier up.
Yeah.
And so strategically, the recommendation here, you can honestly pick, the idea was you could pick what you wanted to fund with ARPA or what you wanted to fund with free cash. We wanted to try to fund as much of the requests as we could with the resources that we have of free cash and some of the ARPA funding we have available. And so that's how this list was developed. And as far as the structural gear, it was kind of, okay, 28 sets were requested. We don't have the financial ability to do all 28, so let's get at least half this year, recognizing that we're going to have to put a significant investment in again next year, but half is a good start compared to what we have now. So you get 12 through the capital, free cash, and then another 2 sets, which we've already been approved through the earmark funding. So that's how that figure was developed. And then the financial management system, that is something we absolutely have to do. And the thought there was put that through ARPA. And the wood chipper came about just because it was a previous request. It's something that, the highway surveyor has mentioned as a priority. I trust our department heads. They're skilled in their areas, and that's the reason why it's on there.
Okay.
But those two are still up for, the Board of Selectmen would still have to approve those.
Okay. Frank, can you state your recommendation again with regards to the wood chipper?
Well, what I was looking at was taking 60,000 of the 84 and moving it up into the police vehicles and removing 60,000 out of the 120 and putting that back over to free cash. And then it leaves $24,000 that we could use in one of the other line items here that currently has free cash in it, and move that out of there.
I'm a little confused, Frank.
Yeah, it's two separate.
$24,000 for the wood chipper, that's it?
No.
I think he's saying not to do the wood chipper.
Not to do the wood chipper.
Don't do the wood chipper.
No.
So I think what he's suggesting is to fund, so let's get rid of the 84, and then you could fund one of the police vehicles through the ARPA funding, which would reduce free cash by 60K.
So you'd ultimately have 60,000 in free cash if you did that.
Yeah, but there's still 24,000 available in ARPA funding.
Right, but that's under the Board of Selectmen. They have control over that.
We as the FinCom only are reviewing and approving the capital.
And so this was presented just for, so you could see the big picture. Town meeting doesn't decide ARPA. So none of the ARPA stuff will go there. It was just, I wanted to show, these were all of the requests, and we're funding these with free cash, but we're also going to fund these other ones, just not with free cash.
I was just going to ask that question. So ARPA is our decision strictly. No one does.
There's no committee that sits over it. Yeah.
And we haven't taken it up, so I can't tell you what we're going to do.
Yeah, so I think your feedback is valid. Like, you can certainly give your feedback, but we as FinCom don't have the voting.
Will those two show up in that warrant article?
No.
All right, so I think that needs to be made clear. So the financial management system and the...
So this
is just an internal sheet, though.
This is an internal sheet that I passed around so everyone can see. You all did get copies of the draft warrant. That has what is going to be there, which does not include these.
I mean, I think it needs to be clear, just so we aren't...
So just a question logistically for the chipper. If that were to not be purchased this year, what types of, I'm assuming curbside service would be probably the first to go, but would the device that they have right now in operation be enough to satisfy their needs as a department for tree trimming around town, things like that?
I think it would continue to, it's fulfilled the need over the past several years. It's just a matter of, it becomes more unreliable. So if they were out there and anticipated doing work and it breaks down, well now, that work can't be done. or the unit that Steve was proposing had more capacity. One of the things he mentioned was it had some sort of like winch on it, so they could actually, you know, go in the woods, the guys could attach it, drag it out, rather than them having to manually go in and drag things out and then feed it through the chipper. So programming to the public would be expanded, and then just more reliability. And potential, who knows, right? The machine won't run all year, and we may not have to fix it, but there may be, may not. Right? And that's with anything. But as it gets older and is used more, there's certainly more of a chance that it will need higher maintenance costs.
Okay, more questions?
Any other questions, comments, concerns? No? Okay, so we'll look to dispose the capital plan on Monday, I guess, but you want to go through
Yeah, the only other thing is, so you all received a copy of the draft warrant. Everything on there is you know, pretty accurate. We're tightening up the numbers based on everything here tonight, so we'll work on that over the next couple days, send out a new draft. The only other article that we have had to add, you heard me reference earlier, was the unemployment costs. So there's going to be an additional article to transfer $100,000 from free cash to our unemployment budget.
Which may or may not get spent in the next.
Correct, yeah.
Depending on how it shakes out.
No, that would stay there. That would stay in our unemployment budget.
So we
So
don't
it's a
have
separate.
100,000 there from going forward.
It would stay there.
We would transfer it to that
for this
account.
year.
Yep, it would stay there. It's an article, so it would stay in that account
Right.
until it was utilized, or if we ever, you know, were to transfer it back from there.
Gotcha.
Why have we never had a line item for unemployment?
So the way that Halifax has historically done it is through an article, through an appropriation in an article. And we do have funding in there now, just not enough to absorb the potential cuts that the school may be facing. So we have about $33,000 in there now. So we want to be on the safe side. So allocating another 100 would put us in a good spot.
When was the last time we actually had a cut in personnel that we needed? Unemployment, it's been a while.
We had a fraudulent claim come in the past year that we're still waiting to get refunded, but we haven't had to use it
Yeah,
in a number of years.
that kind of explains why you haven't seen it very often. It just doesn't, it's a different circumstance. All right, any other
No,
questions?
informative.
Any other questions?
Okay, motion to adjourn, I guess, on...
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Motion to adjourn the finance committee? So moved. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 7-0.